So why not just get back to this? Where were we? Okay, so I've got a way to okay, I don't know if I don't even know if anybody's still here. No viewers. Alright, so I didn't really have all my settings set up for my last stream. I'm still getting used to this, setting up Twitch and all that. But I'm just going to use it to show my workflow, what I'm doing with 001 Game Creator, how I work with different programs, some of my graphics software that I work with, some of the weird little tools. I don't know why those are over there. But, and just random stuff that I'm in the middle of, and how I do it all. Because why not? There's so much random things that I feel like I should show. So, if you're not familiar with Screaming Brain Studios, that is a project I started several years ago that involves the use of ancient, out-of-date, abandoned, forgotten tools from the depths of the internet. This is definitely a niche project. It's a niche set of tools and graphics and such. There's a bunch of tutorials you can go to, and I mean, for doing all kinds of various things, old school style. Like there's some stuff on making first-person dungeons, graphics for the old style grid-based dungeon crawlers. There's stuff on working with isometric tiles, textures, cropping. There's a couple other ones in here, very specific, some super simple things like making textures circular, so you can use them for different things like texture work with roofs, and there's also some cool stuff on converting textures into isometric versions or isometric tiles, and how you can just do all this with free tools. Everything's free. All the tutorials are free. Just about all the tools I have listed on this page are free, and every single asset pack is totally free, public domain. It is available on itch.io. It's screamingbrainstudios.itch.io.com, or you can go to OpenGameArt. There's a whole bunch of this stuff on OpenGameArt, and it's everything from textures to tile sets, isometric tile sets. There's giant piles of textures and buildings, roofs, pretty much all the stuff you need to make some little prototypey games or simple projects. There's some stuff in the style of sandbox games, kind of Minecraft-y. Yeah. But I'll basically be going through all the stuff that I work with as I work with them, because that's really the only way I think I can ever come up with anything to show off for you guys, is to just do it. So I'll just pick up where I left off earlier. I'm working on an old project of mine that I started probably 2015 or 2016. I did take a break for a couple years, and now I'm reworking the whole thing. And it is a space exploration game where you fly around in a little rocket ship, or a little spaceship, or shuttle, I don't know. I haven't really decided yet. And you can go around exploring, scanning planets, and making discoveries, and there's supposed to be a storyline and I'll get there as I go along, but I just want to document the process. I want to make it, you know, something that can be watched and referenced. But in the case of this particular project, this is a remake, not even a remake, I'm redesigning it from the ground up, building the whole project over again. There's a lot of stuff here that you'll see that's kind of placeholdery. I'm using, AI generated background here. There's some old, I think the player ship graphic that I'm using is ancient. It's an old little pixel art ship I drew. It's not great, it's not horrible, it's just, it's a ship. It flies through space. It's supposed to be in top down. Flies around and, it can mine stuff. There's a bunch of random graphics in here that I won't go through right now, but let's say on a normal day I'm just kind of winging it, as they say. I'll just pick something that's been in my head, see if it works. Sometimes I am just kind of translating stuff from my older project. This is originally called Alpha Beta, working in one called Alpha Delta at the moment, but Alpha Beta was originally this experiment. It's an experiment in my first foray into 001 Game Creator. 001 Game Creator is a super affordable. Wow, these are loud as heck. Yikes. Not even running that much. Okay, I don't know if that's interrupting my microphone or ability to come through, but so originally it was an old game that I had in my head, this little space exploration game that was originally inspired by Starflight, Star Control 2. There were some old titles that played in a top-down perspective with, you could interact with aliens, you could land on planets, explore stuff, and I started to kind of create my own weird little version of this. And the biggest problem was I found that I started making everything too small, too squished, and when you run the game, this is the size of the window, which, is sure fine, but it's really small. It's just really small. And after a while, like most game dev folk, you kind of discover that you're in over your head, or the scope is just too large. And I was taking on too much of this project.
Greetings, Captain Goober.
But you are in space. There are asteroids that you can mine. There are,
out of range.
Very close.
Scanning.
I don't know what happened to my mining laser there. Yeah, you could fly around. There's little space stations you can dock at.
Docking.
You can go to different areas of the space station and buy stuff for your ship, bullets and little modules, or you could go, pick up missions here at the bulletin board. I had random generated everything from errands, go to the poop sector, and obviously a lot of random placeholder stuff in there. But scroll by, there's a little news ticker that would the possession of space weed on board this station will not be tolerated. There's space weed, and you can pick up rumors in the bar, or hire all these random crew members, and they'd get random names, random first and last names, random professions. They could pull from a pool of like 20 different professions or something. Scouts, doctors, cartographer. You go repair ship. Yeah, just all this stuff that you could do with your ship. From, you know, all of your cargo, checking the prices in the different sectors. I was trying to make everything very streamlined, like more so than some games. And this particular job, there's, I guess the animation's broken. Whoops. There's a lot of stuff that breaks when I just kind of leave things for years. So the ultimate, oh my gosh, this guy, I forgot about this guy. Okay, so usually you would just fly around. There's a
Out of range.
bunch of different planets.
Scanning. New discovery.
Scan them,
Docking.
discover things, and there's all these little stats and descriptions, and you'd rescan the planet, find yourself a little landing area, and my mistake was trying to do everything in 3D, which, you know, anyone who's ever worked with 3D stuff, obviously it's not as straightforward as it can be. Like, you have to consider the texture designs, all this stuff that I didn't think about when I switched to 3D. So I'm kind of, I don't know, on the fence whether I want to even try to re-implement 3D in the new version or not. But this is the general idea of the game. You kind of land on planets, drop a rover down, explore, harvest nodes, harvest resources. You can mine asteroids and stuff, and there's
Scanning.
a whole bunch
New
of planets
discovery.
to discover. I forgot that this guy doesn't shut up when you come back either.
Docking.
Yeah. So that sat around for a long time until I decided to pop back in and try and fix some things. After years, I had learned a whole bunch of stuff. This came from, you know, other prototypes, other games that I started in 001. And eventually I decided I might try and tackle this project again. So I started from scratch, started rebuilding everything from the ground up. It's still the same general concept, minus the tininess. So it's bigger, I have more space to work with, I give myself more space, and I think overall I've been able to approach it in a more organized fashion than when I first began. So just kind of jump in here. They're basically, this isn't the beginning of the game. This is going to be what the mechanics are. The mechanics are, I guess I can turn this music down a little bit. It's a little bit loud. But it's the same layout. You've got your little menu in the corner here. None of these are functional yet, but
Scanning.
you'll scan some planets,
Entering planetary orbit.
enter the orbit, and this is where you'll end up interacting. There's usually going to be a big description here. I just haven't filled out all the empty space of these menus, which is supposed to have more stuff. But the idea is to, you know, perform a scan on the planet's surface.
Life forms detected.
Using these little placeholder symbols, an asterisk and an @ symbol. There's going to be icons at one point, but I haven't gotten to making icons yet. Excuse me. But then you'll end up selecting different hotspots on the planets, and at the moment these buttons aren't finished. Neither of them do anything, but you'll be able to launch probes to, you know, intercept, or not intercept, to investigate. Probes have a limit, so you'll have to restock on probes, but you can use them to harvest resources and whatnot. And then usually there's an option somewhere to deploy the rover to investigate an anomaly or like ruins or something, and, you know, it'll basically let you drop a rover down. And the concept with the stations is very similar. There's a menu, and
Docking.
It looks the same, except, you know, we've got a credits display here, and you can navigate to different areas of the space station to trade goods and pick up missions, go hire crew members for your ship, and buy equipment and stuff. So it's ultimately supposed to be, you know, like a little RPG style, with Turbo, the game here. It's supposed to be a little RPG. You explore in space, scanning and documenting discoveries, and you can find little life forms and flowers and plants on alien worlds, and there should be other races and species and NPCs to interact with. And yeah, you can shoot. I'm going to have a series of weapons. There's going to be combat and all that. I haven't implemented everything yet, but there's a lot there already. As far as
Minerals detected.
the gameplay, you know, the basic mechanics are in place, and so you can scan the planets and you'll find these different hotspots. It'll store all of your scans, it'll keep track of everything. I haven't connected everything yet, so there's a lot of stuff that just stays the same, but you'll be able to pick, you know, different hotspots that you haven't investigated. Sometimes they'll just clear out, but should be, you know, dialogue screens with interactions. You know, you can talk to people or interact with aliens, investigate ruins, bones, weird structures. Should be all kinds of stuff eventually. Right now I'm just in the beginning of implementing all these mechanics again. So I've got turning that it's very floaty when you let go of the controls. There's some, you know, kind of weighty turns to it. You have to slow down a turn. There's no rocket trails at the moment. I'm having some issues with the particles, but I will eventually have, you can sort of see the colors change, which is a pose change. So when you're speeding up, it's red, but that at least indicates what's going on, since I can't get the particles working at the moment. And as you discover the planets, they kind of, you know, get uncovered on the map. I haven't decided whether that's a good idea or not, or if I want to do that some other way. Maybe I can get some opinions if anybody even sees these or watches these. But that's mostly the concept. There's no combat yet. AI is going to be a tricky one, but I'd like to document that here as well. So I mean, I can definitely benefit from the addition of combat, which is really what I want. Combat in the game is supposed to help you improve, like, your skill levels and your captain's rank, and then you investigate planets, and there's supposed to be a storyline, and none of it's solidified, and some of it's really old, and I've kind of scrapped some ideas. So there's a lot to it, but at least I feel like it would be worthwhile to record some of the workflow that I have. When I have an idea, I kind of just dive in and get going. It would be a good idea to record that. So at the moment, I will start probably back where I was earlier. I don't know. Actually, what I was working on, I was attaching some behaviors to the deploy button. There's a mechanic where the player will have I think it's going to start out pretty low, but you should have a number of probes, and the probes are launchable from the docking screen, so you can launch probes down to the hotspots that you found, and that'll all happen pretty much using this button. But what it needs to do is pull a bunch of information, which, looking at these, it's crazy trying to break it down in my head sometimes, because they're so ridiculous. But this program is wonderful, and the way that it works is you just kind of follow a chain of values, and I don't know the best way to demonstrate, but the way that I tend to do these, you know, if I wanted to get the information out of a variable, like the way that I'm storing data sometimes looks crazy to some people, rather than just creating a list, you know, mineral 0, mineral 0 anomaly. Rather than doing some simple boring list or something, it looks like just one big line, but that itself is a collection of collections of collections. So you can store data inside this. I've got 3 smaller chunks, which I'm using these lines to kind of indicate. These 3 are separate lines, basically, or separate hotspots that spawn on the map. These are the coordinates stored in the second half of each of these, and basically I take the X from the first 3 and the Y from the last 3, the type of hotspot from the first, and whether it's active or inactive or complete from the second line there. So it's all a whole bunch of data here, and to get down to it, you actually have to use these functions in 001 called split into collection, which is super useful if you've never used it before, you don't know what it is. It can take pretty much any other value and separate it into a list, but it'll do so by a delimiter, which in this case is the character that separates your elements. And in the case of this, I'm using a semicolon because it's super easy to remember. It's an obvious separator. I don't know, just it seemed right. So if I wanted to split something like the name hotspot, oh my gosh, I can't type right now, hotspot 1, and if I wanted to split it down into these 2 elements, hotspot and the number 1, I would just use the delimiter here, match this underscore. Since I'm using an underscore to separate these 2 values, I can actually just press OK, and this will give me a list of hotspot in line number 1 and the number 1 here on line number 2. So that's useful in a lot of cases where you want to store something in a weird way like that. The hard part is accessing individual pieces of that list, because you have to split it down to get to each element. So in order to get through here, you have to split by semicolon, which gives you 3 of these. In order to split this set of numbers, you have to split this by the dash, and then you're also left with this, which you can split down using the underscore. And in this way you can actually continuously increase the number of lines of data, that if you wanted to add more to it, you could use a different symbol like a question mark, color, slash. Well, slash is already I would use something probably more like a, I don't know, @ symbol, color, velocity. You could store all of this in a line just using different delimiters, but then you have to split it back down again. So what I'm trying to do here is, first I've got my way to pull the coordinates. These will give me what coordinates I need, or where the hotspot's currently sitting. This second one here, I have to change this. Pull the completion status of the hotspot. The completion status. I don't know if this is all important to explain, but in the case of this setup here, let's move this down here. I've got to change this. Completion. Okay, so type is the hotspot type. There are 4 types in this game: anomaly, mineral, fauna, and flora. We'll put that aside for now. The second value will be the completion, whether it's been investigated or not. This is normally going to be a 1 or a 0. And then there's a location value. The first 3 digits are the X position, and the second 3 are the Y position. And that's also useful because as long as I don't use the same exact spot twice, this 6-digit number can also function as a unique identifier, that when I trigger the field that has this number, I can trigger an event or dialog screen or something that's just attached to this number, which is really nice. I don't have to come up with anything fancier to attach unique things to the single button. And then what this does is it takes the, whether it's on or off, this kind of is just to piece together a sentence here. For my own purposes, just to check, whether things are working. I like to use a lot of logs, return logs, or log displays. If you're working with 001, a lot of times there's a whole bunch of stuff going on behind the screen, and you can see it. It's got a built-in debug, like a pile of debug stuff, debugger windows. You can see all the different maps that are loaded, the interfaces, whether they're on or off. You can actually go in further and see each of the fields that are on your interface, change the cameras, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes there's stuff that's not in the debugger that you need to see anyway, or that you would want to see. So I make my own like overlays that they tend to, I don't know, look kind of messy. It's just a bunch of numbers, but they keep track of everything that I'm doing, like the velocity, the current force being applied to each of these axes, the universal drag, which is how fast it slows down when you let go of a key. There's like thruster values, how much power is going into your thrust. If you boost, it increases that a bit. Keeping track of poses and rotations, your angles. There's a snapped angle, rounded angles. Everything from how fast you're turning to how long it takes to slow down the turn. I think there's another one that's just hidden. There's a couple that are hidden that I think only happen when I'm angle to turn. There's a couple. That's what angle is needed to face an object. How long it would take to actually face the object if you're holding down the key. Like from this position, it'll take 2 seconds. And there's delta time, the actual values that are being stored inside the ship, all kinds of stuff. But that's super useful. Make your own little overlay to show you that there's stats behind the scenes going on when you can't find them in the debugger. And this is a useful value here. Main.testing will check whether you are in test mode. So you can actually include I guess a control set in the project, and you don't have to delete it when you release it, because if somebody's playing the game, if they bought it from Steam or something, that control won't work because it checks to see if you're in testing. So main.test is the use value. There's also, there are people following me and not watching. Meanwhile, there's kind of I've got this little repetitive interface thing, and I've been kind of fiddling with different types of interface graphics in one of my weird abandoned programs, and this is actually one of my favorites. It's the World Creator version 3, which came out maybe 10 years ago. The original version, I think, came out in 2002. It's been around quite some time. I've got a couple different versions of this over the years, and I do a lot of my graphic work with it. As you can see, I do a lot of there's a lot of character animation stuff. There's poses and stuff for female clothes, male clothes, cylindrical mass. I have a whole bunch of different animation tools for making, moving lights. Mostly do interface work and isometric graphics. You can actually make isometric pieces really easily with this. Like, I can make a wall. It's not going to look good, but... And then those end up getting texturized over here. I actually make the bases these grayscale squares. These are combined with a texture to create this like depth look. So I mean, you can see these are actually overlays, and this piece just fits underneath them. You can put it wherever, really. And I think that got rid of some of my color somehow. Just some dark values, whatever. It looks okay. So the basic concept is just using shading and lighting to create what looks like, you know, pressed metal or pieces of stone, or even just, I don't know. I like the aesthetic. I like the old school appearance. It has this cool feel to it. And you know, when you're flying around in space, there's going to be, I think I'm going to make the images a little bit more pixelated, but I haven't quite decided yet. And then I'm trying to rebuild the whole project, and in my the original project kind of got to be overcomplicated, where, you know, try not to do this to yourself if you're working with 001 Game Creator. You know, I had, you know, hundreds of nonsense variables, sometimes that were duplicates, and sometimes there were several that did the same thing. And I have learned from my mistakes over the years. I can reuse certain things. In some cases, I can do stuff differently. I had interfaces that were more complicated than they should be, generators that made, like, character names, and just I drowned myself in overcomplication. And this time around, I think I've limited myself to a certain few global values that may or may not even remain, because I'm keeping everything so much simpler than it was before. And even as simple as it is right now, there's more to it than I think there was in the previous version, because I can actually feel it becoming more of a game than it did before, at least the old project. The old project had some, I don't know, it had some strange movement behaviors. It had a couple, like, graphical bugs. There's a lot of issues that I didn't ever iron out, and I would move on to another project, or not another project, like another part of the project, and ultimately forget that I needed to fix something. So this time around, I'm staying more focused. So there's less to show off this time around, because I tend to try and solidify each piece as I go. So, you know, here is the mini-map. This took about a day, and the mini-map, all it's really doing is checking a few details about the player, whether there's a... Oh, this is not even the mini-map positioner. This is for flashing text on the screen, but, you know, these little dots on the mini-map, these are positioned by the player moving around on screen. I believe that's in this timer. Yeah, when the player's moving around, there's it's not this one, it's this one. Jeez, that's a web. These are all the controls, and we're just going to ignore that right now. But the player is basically constantly, the position of the mini-map is constantly updating the player's position. This is basically just scaling down the position and adding an offset, since it's 1096 pixels from the left of the screen. I have to multiply it by the actor's X and Y position by the minimap divider value, which is another value that comes into play that happens, I think, when you enter the interface. It loads it. No, somewhere it takes the current map and divides it by a certain value, either the size of the minimap graphic, I believe. That's actually a pretty helpful tip in making minimaps.